Hi, everybody. This is Kerristen, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Relocate Podcast. This podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And each episode, I'll have a new guest sharing their takeaways of being in a new place and how it has defined their sense of identity, sense of belonging, and more. So today we have Danielle. She is originally from California. She's also lived in Arizona and Pennsylvania. Eventually made her way to Florida with her family. And she is an expert coffee drinker, working mama of two. She enjoys connecting with others, offering comfort and understanding through life's challenges. So today's episode is going to be exciting. And she's also a writer, and she finds solace in baking, drinking more coffee, singing karaoke, and enjoying her night out. I feel like her story is a testament to resilience, and today we're just going to invite all the listeners to just explore her story, how she's overcome a lot from grief, just hope in the human experience, and her takeaways from how her journey has impacted her worldview on a lot of things. So, Danielle, thank you so much for joining. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great day. I had a great big cup of coffee this morning from my favorite local coffee shop. So that's always good start. And, as of we're recording this, it's a Friday. So extra wonderful.
Do you have like a go-to blend or flavor?
It depends. I go back and forth sometimes. If it's like a second coffee of the day, then it's usually like just like a regular, coffee. I'm always a hot coffee girly. I respect those iced coffee drinkers, but for me, it's 99% hot coffee, either whether it's snowing or 100 degrees outside, it's always hot. And there are occasions, obviously, where I will drink iced coffee, but just, cream, sugar, maybe a little bit of flavor. But, I just usually typically, if it's like a place, it'll be a latte with some sort of flavor or a flat white, something easy. So in our little town where we're at now, we have a bunch of different coffee shops. And so they all have different things. So I like to visit them all, support local, and just enjoy to see what else they have there.
Local. Love that.
Yay!
We're going to get into that and how your journey's been in Florida. First, I kind of want to get into California.
Absolutely.
Because that seems to be very popular as far as like...
Yes. So born and raised Cali girl, and a lot of people, when they think of California, they think Los Angeles, and I was born and raised in Northern California in the great Sacramento region. And even for being such a big area, it's quite a small town. And what I love about it, and still love, like, we go back. My partner has some of his family still live there. So we go every other year if we can, usually at Christmas or in the summer, because it's such a great location. You are not very far from a beach, from trees, from snow, if it's that time of year, sometimes both, a lake, a body of water. And the Sacramento Valley is just a great place. They've built up, the downtown area for so many different restaurants and different things to do. And we lived a little bit outside of that in suburbia. And even that was, still up and coming when we lived there. But as much as people love LA, we don't, have all the celebrities and all of that, but we do have some really great, they're big into arts, lots of breweries and coffee shops. And it holds its own sort of Mod Podge of so many different cultures and so many different people, places. And it's like just a conglomerate of all these, different things like all come together. They celebrate all kinds of different cultural events, and art events. There's lots of activism as well. I have friends who volunteer with mutual aid and also go to the art shows. And just, it was a great experience growing up. Now looking back of just how much diversity there was and how much I was able to be exposed to, even though I did go to a small private school. And so I loved living there when we lived there. I didn't know how wonderful it was until, you kind of move away and then you're like, oh, I miss X, Y, and Z or this and that. Like we were 2 hours from Tahoe and, we could hit the beach, 2 hours or so, or we did a lot of camping. There was all kinds of, hikes or wilderness or just so many different things that you could go to. Reno, Nevada was 2 hours away as well. And so it was just kind of like you kind of were able to touch so many different things depending on what you wanted to do during that day or weekend or whatever. So there was a lot of great experiences being able to go to those places like Lake Tahoe. I didn't know how many people have said, oh my goodness, I would love to go to Lake Tahoe. And here I was like taking it for granted in my 20s. And we also have a very diverse like wine country. We're also, I forgot, we're also like 2 hours, depending on traffic, away from San Francisco. And so that's always, a big popular place as well. And I think about 2 hours from like Napa Valley. But there's also some very small wineries as well that we got to know. It was just, culturally speaking, it was just so wonderful to see so many different diverse populations. And I think that's one thing that I do miss where I am now.
You sound so enthusiastic just talking about where you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And now that really makes me wonder what made you decide to leave California.
I know. And it's one of those things too that's like, it's really hard to come back. Like once you leave, it's really hard to come back. Not that it's impossible. My partner and I have been together for over 10 years, and he grew up in California as well. And it was sort of one of those things that we weren't stagnant, but it was just we were a little bit looking for something else, something like an adventure, I guess you could say. And so one of my best friends who I met later in life was one of those people that just like you meet instantly, you're like, this is my person. And we ended up living just by accident, like 7 minutes from each other. And so with that, so, all the time, like, I'm going to come over, you're going to come over, like, just back and forth, it became natural for us to want to spend so much time together. And then when she decided to pursue a PhD program, she just offhandedly had said, oh, well, I got into this program in Arizona and, I'm going to be moving. And obviously, like, I was devastated. And she was like, oh, you should come with me. And it got me thinking, like, could I move? Could we move? Would this be possible? I talked with my partner and I was like, what do you think about this? Because for some people, it would be a crazy idea to just uproot your family and move to a different state. And my son was young at the time. He was barely kindergarten. And my partner and I talked and we were like, yeah, why not? We had a group of friends, but I think we were looking for something more and something, I don't know what it was. I think we were also transitioning, from your early 20s, late 20s into 30s. I feel like there is a big transition. And sometimes you just kind of I feel like the itch to do something. And so we decided, all right, like, let's do it. And we got an apartment, sight unseen. We saw like a layout. It was in the area we wanted. We had never seen it. And we had moved apartments before. So for me, that wasn't, such a huge deal. We were pretty close to our friends and we had other friends, like, so it was my best friend and then another one of our friends who they both moved. And so we were like, yeah, let's go. And so we started the adventure to Arizona. I looked at the schools and I looked at where we were going to live. I was remote at the time. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me to just be like, yeah, I mean, why not? I did talk to my employer and let them know, and they were like, oh yeah, that's fine. A lot of the work wasn't on specific time zones, even though they were in California. It ended up being completely fine. And my partner was working just like summer camps and with kids after school. And he was like, absolutely, like, let's do it. So we packed up and me and my son and I packed our car and we went first. So we were there for a couple weeks, stayed with my friend because he was going to start school. And we were like, okay, here we are. And then, a couple weeks later, we did the move out with the place in Sacramento. And my boyfriend and his brother brought the U-Haul to Arizona, and we unloaded and started a new adventure in Arizona. And it was quite the adventure, to say the least.
You mentioned looking into different like schools for your son at the time. What was that process like?
It was definitely difficult. One thing that I've learned is that when you live someplace for so long, you kind of think like, oh, well, this is normal in other places as well. So, for example, like in California, where we lived, it was done by school districts. So I lived on 123 Main Street. Then I'm in, the South Southern District, the South District or whatever. And so you were only really able to go to those schools in your school district. And it's not like that everywhere. And so in Arizona, they did kind of have school districts, but then they also had a lot of charter schools. And then they also had a lot of private schools. And certainly the charter schools, a lot of them were free. And then the private schools you paid money for. And so with Arizona not necessarily being very high ranking for schools, I wanted to look at something that wasn't necessarily a public school. And so it was a smaller school. I talked with the principal, had a phone call, saw pictures and ended up just enrolling him in that. And he was in first grade. And so my thought was that it would be a little bit easier of a transition or not as traumatic as if it was like, hey, you're leaving ninth grade and we're going to start a new school and you're a sophomore in high school. It definitely was a transition because he went to a different type of school in California. It was very hands-on. It was a Waldorf method, which is similar to Montessori. So it's very child-led, very natural. They did nature walks, but that was actually part of a public school system. And so he was able to be in that. And so moving him from that to this sort of uniforms, new environment was a little bit difficult, but I think he did okay. I think that kids are really resilient. And also just being able to give him experiences. I mean, maybe not traumatic ones, but ones that are able to expand thoughts and your feelings, and that, okay, people are different in different places. I mean, for me, one of the first experiences I had with, going to a different place was when I grew up, I was in church. And so we went on a missions trip and we were in California. So we went to Mexico. And that was sort of the first time that I traveled farther away and saw that, okay, people in different countries even live differently. And of course, we were there to evangelize and do a vacation Bible school type of thing. And I went with my dad, and he was very adamant about having me go as well and see not only the poverty, but experience the culture and see that yeah, our bubble is our bubble. And there are some people who never leave the bubble. And then there are other people who burst the bubble and find, all of these different cultures and find how wonderful and beautiful that they are and how we're more alike than different. And so I wanted him to experience just different things besides the, living in California and going to this small school. And so I felt okay with him, with us moving and taking an adventure and sort of moving everything to Arizona. And looking back, I think it was a good decision for our family at the time. It was very hot. I don't think that I would live there again on purpose, but it was a new experience for us as well. And it also sort of thrust us into, okay, we have some friends and we have some family, but what are we going to do to be able to create community? And we had a lot of gatherings at my friend's house. And she had a lot of people that she knew from school. And so she would invite those people, and we did Friendsgiving. And I think we ended up going back to California for Christmas, but we got together a lot. And so some of her friends became our friends, and even if it was just the four of us, and my son, we had a great time. My friend and I, we'd go grocery shopping at 8 a.m. every weekend to kind of beat the heat, and got used to all of the nuances that were Arizona. In Arizona, nobody goes outside during the day. And then the minute the sun goes down, everybody's in the pool, and like, that wouldn't happen in California because everybody's in the pool or the lake or the river in California.
Right. And I will never complain. I'm
Yeah.
in Central Texas right now, but I mean, we've had some hot days, but I will never complain when I think about Arizona and
Yes,
previous visits where temperatures were almost at 120
exactly.
degrees. I would not want to be
Yeah.
outside neither, like not
And
during the day
people
at least.
who live in Arizona, they always say the same phrase, well, it's a dry heat. And what I didn't understand was, when we first kind of got there, why there was like some sort of mechanism that was on the handles of the doors. I was like, what's that for? And that's because it gets so hot, it'll burn your hand off if you try and touch it,
My gosh.
Yes. And so the whole like trying to bake cookies, that's a thing. It can be done. And it also got us into one,
That's
drinking more
good.
water, obviously. But like everybody in Arizona has like not even a Stanley, but like Stanleys before they were cool sort of thing. Like everybody has some sort of big jug that has a bunch of ice in it that they're carrying around because it's so hot. And I had to pick my son up at 2:30, so it was like brutal. So I would always have a big thing of ice, water, something for him to drink, and like 3 snacks, because even the drive home was just brutal. So yes, I definitely agree with that. Like even now, I don't think that I would trade the Arizona heat for and go to Arizona willingly. I'll take the Florida heat and the humidity any day compared to, 115 at times.
Also, I don't know if you experienced this during the time you were there in Arizona, but I think maybe it was my first trip there, and not even an hour once I got there, and I got lucky. I went inside a CVS to grab like stuff I knew I left at home,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, like it went from sunny till I couldn't see anything outside of the door
Yes.
because of the dust storm.
Yep. Yeah.
That is scary. You can't even, I don't even know if there's like the weatherman warning you, hey, there might be a dust storm tomorrow. I don't know how that goes.
No, I don't remember either, but I do know, I think we only experienced like one or two of them. But yes, there is like similar to like hurricane season, there's monsoon season, and the monsoons were just amazing. I will say, like, Arizona does have the sunsets and just the beautiful colors. Like, you don't see those types of colors other places. And with the mountains, like we lived right not too far, and there was like a mountain range from our balcony, and it was
Hmm.
just so pretty to just sit there. I mean, from the inside and like look out and see. And then the rainstorms, these thunderstorms had so much lightning, and it was like, wow, this is like really cool to experience, especially going from California where it has a little bit more of like defined seasons, especially in Sacramento. Winter is like cold. It can, you can get some frost on your windows, and it rains, and then the summer's hot. But in Arizona, it was like this monsoon season was just like rainy a lot, and, thunderstorms. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like I never felt unsafe because we were mostly always inside when it was during that time, but also just to be able to see like, wow, that's so cool. I just saw that lightning storm. And I really liked that. Definitely, I think I'd take monsoon season over hurricane season here.
It sounds like you enjoyed your time in Arizona too.
This is like when I do end up talking with people about that time. My partner was working nights, so he was working at one of the hotels, so he worked overnights, and I really felt like we were almost like ships in the night type of thing. And I really felt that it was almost a time for like being not reborn, but in a sense of transformation. And that was, I started to go to like really intense therapy. And I don't know if you've ever heard of EMDR. It's like it has something to do with like your eye movement. And they started to use it with veterans who had PTSD. And it had been really helpful in decreasing like depression symptoms. And so I found this really amazing therapist. And, for context, I've been in therapy for a long time. And so, at some point you're like, yeah, I think I'm okay. Like there's a lot that I've worked through and I'm probably good for a while. And then there's maybe something that comes up or something that you're feeling. And so that's usually the time where I'm like, okay, I think I need to go back, and kind of process some more things. And I tell you that I had some of the best healing in that time that we were in Arizona than I did like the past years that we were in California. And I think that part of that was because we didn't have a lot of other friends. We had the friends that we moved with, and certainly like they had schedules and jobs and that sort of stuff. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to call up Christy and like go to her house, or I'm going to call up John and say, hey, let's go grab a drink or something like that. It was more that we were spending a lot of time with our friends, and then it was a lot of time just either us or my son and I. And I feel like I was feeling a little bit lonely. And so I decided to pursue therapy. And at the time, I wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to go get the best therapy there is. I picked a therapist and she introduced me to EMDR. And I feel like I did not leave Arizona the same person that I came in as. And I don't think that would have happened if I would have stayed in California for the rest of my life. And I think that just putting yourself into a new position that you've never been in before, that might seem scary, that you come to that point where you're like, I'm all in. I'm going to jump in both feet. I don't know what's down there, but we'll see. I know how to swim. So, hopefully that goes okay. And I just look upon that time as such a healing time. And I had a lot of trauma when I was younger. I lost my mom unexpectedly when I was 14. That put a lot of things in motion, and really felt that moving was almost like a jumping off point to start a new level of healing in Arizona. And maybe it was the vibe that, Arizona, I've heard, a lot of people go to Sedona and really feel like that energy spiritually. And so I don't know, maybe it was that, along with that I was really ready to face that head on.
Sorry to hear about your mom, by the way. Like,
Thank you.
to have that happen unexpectedly.
Yeah, and being so young also was really difficult, with like the cusp of adolescence. So that's a lot of things that I've worked through in therapy. And also I participated in an anthology with 21 other women where I actually had the chance to talk about losing my mom and then what that was like also becoming a mother. So that was also a process that I was able to pour into and get a lot of healing from as well. It was really a fun experience, and also to come out the other end with, all of these other women who had so many different experiences was also just transformative, really.
I want to touch on motherhood a little bit too, because your son was young when you made that transition to Arizona, and I know it takes years. I think 5 years or so for your body to just kind of like reorient itself, and just that healing process from postpartum and everything that your body is just experiencing during pregnancy. Like it can take a toll, and it can take so long to get back to where you were prior to pregnancy. I'm glad that you mentioned therapy too, and I'm just wondering, because you made another transition, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of
That's okay.
the gun, because you also had another child. How do you think that relocating just impacted your viewpoint and the support that you needed from that aspect of?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So my partner isn't my son's biological father, but he's been around since my son was about 2. And so there was a time where it was just him and I, and that's when we were still in California, and I had created almost like a network of people that were so willing to help me drop everything and say, yeah, I'll pick him up from school, or hey, you need a couple hours, or let me take him overnight, and that was so amazing to have those types of people. And then when I met my partner and, we decided that he was going to move in, that was really big as well, because it was like, I was so protective of my son, because I didn't want to be introducing him to so many different people. And then it's like, oh, well, that person's not here anymore. Sorry. But we had kind of had a couple years, and there was a little bit of a transition because I had moved jobs and daycare was really expensive even back then. And so my partner decided not to work for a little while, and he actually took care of him. And so they were able to really bond. And then when we had this discussion about, are we going to move or not? We kind of talked about it with him, and he didn't really understand. Obviously he was on board because, we had to take him, and it was difficult, I think, for him, in looking back, just because it was such an abruptness of, okay, yeah, we're going to move. We're going to, go to Arizona. And I do think that he did end up having, a good time, and we did move again. But, like I said, I do think that children are resilient, and he is now okay with the fact that we did end up moving. He does talk about California a lot, though. And so there was some mom guilt there for a little while, but being able to uproot, I know, is not for everybody. And certainly in my life, growing up, it was my parents, my dad bought the house before my parents got married and met my mom, and then they lived there forever, 20 years later or whatnot. And although I would have loved to give him that kind of experience, sometimes I just don't think that that's a whole, really possible, especially in the generation where we can't even afford to buy a house. So being in one place, and I mean, when I was with my son, we moved apartments because it was cheaper to live in this other apartment. But having that network of people when he was so young was so helpful. And when we decided to move, it was really difficult to say goodbye to those people. We still talk to them today, but
Okay.
it was still, it was still hard because we made all of these relationships. And there were some people that, we don't talk to anymore. And then there are some people that we still talk to this day. And, I really hold the thought of sometimes people are only in your life for a season, and maybe they have a purpose to be there. Maybe they're there to support you just for that certain amount of time. And that's what their purpose was. And then we have, those other people who are like rocks in our lives, who we see at least once a year. We talk to, we FaceTime. And it was definitely an experience to go from being a single parent to then partnered to then, all right, we're in a new city, in a new place.
Yeah.
And yeah, motherhood is a wild journey for sure. Coming off of postpartum and really, like you said, feeling more grounded in who you are, I, started to do things that were just for me. And especially even when we were in California, but a lot of, in Arizona, one of the first things that I do now when I move is to immediately join a Facebook mom group for the area that I'm in. And I don't use Facebook a whole lot, but I do use it for the groups because I think they have a lot of really good groups that you can find. And so I'll join two groups. One is the city word of mouth, or, what's going on kind of thing. And then I'll join a mom group. And there's so much information in those groups. You can find anything. And so I'll go and, search for whatever it is, because of course somebody else has already asked about it before. And also with the mom groups, that was able to, find people who had kids, my son's age, and sort of trying to make these connections with people in a new city. And it's difficult because you have to put yourself out there. You're like, okay, I'm going to meet this stranger at the park and see if we hit it off, kind of thing. But a lot of the experiences that I've had in those types of situations have been positive. even some that, I still talk to, even though we don't live in the same city, I still talk with them.
And I think it's so important, no matter where you go, to find your community. You don't have to be alone. You just gotta do a
Yes.
little bit of research.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we left Arizona though.
We did. So the
What
timeline,
what was the fine line in this process?
the timeline was COVID.
Oh,
Yeah. So we left Arizona. Gosh, I can't even know. I don't even know what year. I mean, I know what year COVID was. So it must have been like 2017, 2018. And we moved to Arizona and we were there. And like, I distinctly remember it being like January, and there were some rumblings about different things. And at this time, my sister lived in Pennsylvania. She'd lived in Pennsylvania for 15 years or whatever. Met her husband, and they had, a couple kids, and she was still living there and working. So her and I would talk. We talk a lot, and she was like, I don't know, I've heard about this, virus, and so as it continued, I got scared and anxious, and I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to be stuck inside, and we don't have any family, and all we have is a balcony. And so I talked with my partner, who amuses me. Like, he appeases me. Yes. He he appeases me a lot. He's like I can be like kind of up and down sometimes, obviously, and he's like very even
yeah,
sometimes,
very
or like
go with the flow.
he's also logical, or like brings some realistic aspects to it. And I was like freaking out, as a lot of people did, and I said, I don't know what we're gonna do. And my sister was like, well, you guys could just come here for a couple weeks and like until things settle down. And so at the time, my sister had gotten divorced, so it was just her and her two kids and her dogs. And so she was like, yeah, it would be nice to have other adults in the house as well. So we ended up, same thing, we packed the car and our two cats, and we left for Pennsylvania. We drove there. It was in the middle of thunderstorms and all kinds of crazy weather. We were like, all right, here we are for, quote, 2 weeks. And we ended up moving in with her. So obviously there was like a lot of different feelings with being in a state where you didn't really know a whole lot of people, you didn't have family, and so many things were happening. My son's school went virtual and they closed, and then my partner was working in hospitality in a hotel, and so they were going to be shut down. And
Yeah.
so we had another conversation of like, okay, like let's go for a couple weeks, and then we had another conversation of like, are we going back to Arizona during this time? And I feel like in that time, there was so much unknown for so many people, whether it was a job or what's going to happen with how this moves through and what is this going to look like. And I think that was part of it. And he was like, whatever you want to do. So what ended up happening was we flew back to Arizona, all of us, my son included, and I packed our apartment, and then my son and I flew back to Pennsylvania, and then once again, my boyfriend and his and his brother drove the U-Haul, and that was our move to Pennsylvania. And once again, so many different, like I had been to Pennsylvania a lot of times, and we were like central Pennsylvania. And one of the first couple times where I felt like, wow, I'm different, was when I was younger. I was like in college, and so my sister has two kids, and I came down for a summer for like 6 weeks, and I would take the kids places, and that was sort of the first time where I was like, there really is nobody who looks like me here. I am, half Mexican and half, white. I present more Hispanic. People have asked me all the time if I speak Spanish. I wish that I did, but unfortunately I don't. And so I knew that there were so many people who were like, something doesn't add up. You have two white kids and this brown woman. Like, is she the nanny, or and my family is very a mixed bag, I guess you could say. So my mom had two kids before she met my dad. And so my one sister has brown hair. My other sister has blonde hair. My mom had like an auburn brown hair. And my dad's Mexican and like American Indian. And so he gets very dark. And then there's me. So like our family pictures were very interesting. Just in general, especially like in the 90s. It was a little bit unheard of to have such a mixed blended family, especially somebody who had two kids and was divorced and then married somebody and then had another kid. So I was like kind of used to that. But when I was in Pennsylvania when I was younger, it was like, okay, there's not really a whole lot of people that really look like me here. Thankfully it's gotten a little bit more diverse, but not so much as like coming from California and even coming from Arizona. And so that was something that was very apparent, even when we did live there for a while. And it was hard to kind of feel like, okay, yeah, this is very different from the things that I've known and the things that I love about, where I grew up. Like I love the diversity and seeing so many different people and so many different cultures. I think it's great. And then coming to a place that is like very white. And so many times, I mean, I don't know why I was surprised, but just seeing so many things like flags on the side of the road and like the different feelings that I felt when I would see those, like Confederate flags. It was just like, okay, yeah, we're not in California anymore. We're not in Arizona anymore. And that was just a whole other experience living in Pennsylvania, including the snow. That was also not a favorite part of mine. But I think that for what it was during COVID, I think we had a good time. So it was like my sister and I, we'd do the Costco run with our masks. We couldn't go anywhere. And so we would be cooking all types of meals. And she had a pool that they opened for the summer and like a little bit of a yard and the dogs. And so it was like, it ended up being really great for what it was. And for such a time that was really anxious. I was really anxious at that time because you just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it was during that time when my sister and I had talked about what are we going to do next? Are we staying here for the remainder of whatever this might be? Are we thinking about next steps? Because at this point it was like there were so many people who were moving also. It was like, I guess we don't have to stay here. And we talked about what it would look like if we moved together somewhere. And we had thought about that when we were younger. She lived multi-generationally with like her dad, her grandma, her grandpa, and then her family as well in like a big house. And so she'd done that before. She was like, that's easy. And so we kind of started those talks of like, okay, well, if we want to move in together and kind of do a multi-generational blended families, what's that going to look like? And then also, where are we going to go? And we both agreed, like, we need sunshine. We need sunshine. And we weren't going to go back to California because that was really, really expensive. And plus, she was on the East Coast. She wanted to be able to like send the kids to their dads occasionally. And so that was sort of the phase of talking about what's next.
When I'm on the enters of net and I see people, like not a lot of people, just like certain people, they have this conception of people from California moving to certain places that are also heavily populated, but like way less costly, like way more affordable.
Right.
And they're just like, oh, why are these people coming? They're driving up the cost of living here, and now everything's gonna go up and blah blah blah. But I don't think a lot of people see like the other side of the coin in that case, where you picture yourself living in a state where the taxes are high, cost of living is high. You got a mouth to feed. You got a family to raise. And you got to take care of yourself throughout all of that. I can imagine, like, I completely understand why you made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And really it reminds me of like kind of my journey a little bit, where I felt stagnant and I just didn't feel like financially I was progressing, and I didn't know what progression looked like at that point, but I was willing to go somewhere to figure it out.
Yes.
So
Pushing yourself into an experience, that you don't know the outcome of, is really scary for a lot of people. And especially one of my best friends lives in Africa, and she did Peace Corps, and then she stayed there. It's been like 12 years. And I'm like,
love that.
not that I would love for you to come back, but are you going to come back? She loves it there. And it's like, it's something when you find someplace that you're like, okay, this feels good. I could see myself, having roots. I could see myself, getting old here, or enjoying, all of that this has to offer. And it might not be 100% of what I think that I need, but maybe it's what I need right now. And maybe it will unfold that, wow, this was the place that I did need to be. So I think that there's something to be said about putting yourself in a position to have experiences that change you.
Yeah. So with Florida, now you've been there for about 3 years now?
Yeah, almost 4 years. 4 years in
Years.
June.
Wow.
Yeah. And the only reason why I know that is because we got the keys the day my daughter was born. So,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. You did
Yes.
that while you was pregnant.
Yes. It was crazy. We had to sit on lawn chairs and eat off paper plates while we waited for our pod to come back from, storage or whatever, because at that time everybody was moving. So we couldn't get a U-Haul. We had to do like where you pack the pods and then they take it off and that sort of thing. And it was an adventure to pack up, not only our stuff, because we had everything from Arizona and we purged a lot, but then my sister's house that she had with her kids, and then all of anything that like we accumulated in the 1.5, maybe 2 years that we were there, and then moving to Florida. So during COVID, when my sister and I would have these conversations, I was against Florida in the beginning for certain reasons. Just like people have misconceptions about California, I think people also have misconceptions about Florida. Maybe some of them are true, but you hear about the Florida man and you hear about just like, the weather, and it's like all of the like hurricanes, and then, not to mention everything else that has gone on or goes on. And I was like, I don't know about that. And so we decided to take a trip. And also learning how different places treated COVID was also an eye opener. Florida had no restrictions. People were like right next to you in the restaurants where everything was open. And that was also very weird and at first uncomfortable, because in Pennsylvania, it was like maybe 3 tables in the restaurant, very much away. A lot of places had the plexiglass type of thing and they were very strict. And then Florida, it's like people are just living, their normal lives. And so when we came to Florida, one, that was like a surprise, because it was like, oh, all right. And then we went on like a tour all around. And we started in Orlando. And so we went all around, up and down, everywhere. Like, let's drive this way. Let's look at this. Just do a drive by of this property. And we kind of got a feel for like what areas we wanted, what areas, maybe we didn't want to be near the parks. And all of that, because there's so much traffic and we didn't want any of that. So we did, some research and we did some drive around, and then we came back in February and we started to put offers on houses, met with a realtor, saw a bunch of properties. Nothing came through because everybody was moving and everybody was taking up the properties like so quickly. And the realtor suggested this one area and we were like, okay, I guess, yeah. I mean, we looked at it and it was a new build and we were like, okay, let's go. So again, we came into this not seeing it. It was new construction. And we were like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. And originally we wanted to be in a place before my daughter was born. And that didn't happen because construction. And at the time, there was a lot of supply chain inconsistencies, and there was a lot of building going on. So there was a lot of different things that were, that we couldn't get, or the builders couldn't get. And so there was like delay. So April was like the beginning of where we were supposed to hopefully close and move in. And then it was like late April, and then it was like May. And so here I am, like, big pregnant, and this is also quite an adventure. We went from Pennsylvania to Sanford, which is like a little area outside of Orlando. We took the auto train. So we parked my car on the train. We got on the train at like 3 or 4, and it was my son and my niece, who they were both still in school. And this was actually probably not like a couple years, like maybe 4 years ago now, because we came in like April, May, before I was due. And we hopped on the train. The train was overnight. And then we woke up in Florida. I got us an Airbnb for like, I don't know, 8 weeks or something like that. We had to extend. And so I remember in the first Airbnb, it was so fun too. It was like, it was another adventure. And so we set up this big kitchen table, and I had like my monitor, and I had my laptop, and then my son had his laptop, and then my niece had her laptop, and we were all like doing work. And I was like sitting on, one of those exercise balls because I was uncomfortable in a regular chair. And we'd go to the grocery store, and we'd, go to the pool, and that sort of started our life in Florida. And, then my sister ended up coming down after the baby was born with the dogs, because we had to have a fence so they didn't, run out. So thankfully, my best friend who lives in Africa came down for a couple of weeks before my daughter was born. And so we were in the Airbnb, and she was there, and she was like, okay, we have to check out, of the Airbnb. Like, what are we going to, and I was in labor at the time. And so we gave her, the extra rental car. We were like, just keep this and, take my son. We had to call so many people for her to be able to pick up the keys, because she wasn't, me or my sister. And I was like, I'm in labor right now, and we're not gonna be able to pick up the keys. Like, can I send somebody else? So she took my son, and we went to the birth center. And sure enough, she was born, like 5 p.m. that day. We had to be out of the Airbnb by 11. And then we ended up coming home like the next morning to the brand new house. And before that, we had tried to get the pods, but because there was so much demand for the pods to be done, and everybody had a pod and all that kind of stuff, like they were like, oh, well, it's not going to be ready for a week or two. And we really glamped, for until our pods came, because we didn't want to buy more stuff. So what ended up happening with like the house was that my sister and I, like I said, we didn't see this before we moved in, but we saw the layout, and it's a new type of house that's called a next gen, like a next generation. So it has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths on one side. So it has like a master bathroom, and then 2 other bedrooms and a bathroom. And then the living room and the kitchen and the dining room are all kind of in the middle. And then on the other side, next to the kitchen, is a door, and that goes to a 2 bedroom, 2 bath with everything but a stove. And so this was the layout that we bought. My sister has 2 kids. One of them lived with us for a little while, decided to go back and graduate high school there and live with his dad. So my sister and my niece live on, their side is what we call it. And then me and the kids and, my partner live on this other side. So we have the 3 bedrooms, and she has the 2 bedrooms. And it's nice because we're like far enough away. We can close the door, or, we have our own like TV. But if we wanted to be social and be in the middle and like watch TV there, or, we just had like a big family dinner last night, and her boyfriend cooked. It was an experience for sure. But I was like I felt very calm about it. And I was like, we're just gonna, go with the flow. Yeah, we have to, sleep on the air mattress or, whatever, but we have a roof over our heads, we have water, we have food, and we have family. And that's really all that I need. And I wasn't working because I was on maternity leave for a couple weeks, and just sort of like getting into the groove of a new baby and then getting into the groove of a new house and a new area. We moved in right before summer. So yeah, right before the heat.
Yeah. I love your energy. I just want to put that out there. Like, very just like, I'm just going to tackle whatever life brings me.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to when you mentioned shortly after your arrival in Florida,
Mhm.
when you gave birth to your daughter. And I'm wondering if there were any stark differences that you've noticed between your birth process in California and your birth process in Florida, like any subtle differences
Yeah.
with healthcare or anything of that nature.
Right. So my son was actually born in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, gotcha.
So like I said, I had him, there's like a 10-year gap between my son and my daughter.
Gotcha.
When I was living in California, and the pregnancy was a little bit unexpected, and so like I said, my sister was in Pennsylvania and has been for like 15 and had been at that point for years. So I actually like moved in with her, and had the baby there, and it was very different. I thought that maybe it would be more, I don't know, that they would be more in or more like receptacle to like a natural birth. And it was a complete hospital birth. The group that I went to, like the OB group, they did have midwives, but all the midwives were on vacation when I was trying to see them. So that wasn't fun. So I didn't get to see any of the midwives, and I was so sad about that. Because that's what I kind of had thought that I wanted. My sister is very medical. She was a PA for a long time, and her kids were like C-sections, and they were planned. And for some people that works, but I wanted a different experience. And so the experience that I thought that I was going to be able to have, I didn't have. There was a lot of intervention. I was induced, so I was like 41 weeks or 10 days overdue. And they were like, we got to induce you. And I was like, do we have to? There were just a lot of feelings about having my first son, or having my first child, just in general. And there was a lot of things that I struggled with as well. I agreed. And there were so many things that went not the way that I wanted it to go. And as much as I kind of tried, I just ended up, going with the process. So I ended up getting an epidural. And then he was born vaginally, but I did have the epidural. And then he ended up being fine. Nothing crazy. I was in the hospital for the usual couple days. But it was at that point where I thought, okay, I feel like that I could have a different experience. And that's the experience that I had in Florida. And it was interesting because I was seen primarily in Pennsylvania because that's where we lived at the time when I was pregnant. And there was also a lot of interventions because I was older. So, that geriatric pregnancy makes you automatically high risk, which I don't understand. I mean, I understand, but yeah, I don't agree with with
I'm
that a
mad
whole
they
lot.
even called it that. What?
They call it advanced maternal age. It previously was like a geriatric pregnancy, but now they call it advanced maternal age. And that is just, from the research that I've done, is because you have some higher risks in certain instances when you're older. I guess your eggs are a little bit more aged, and you could potentially have an increased risk of certain things. And so I saw a specialist, and I automatically did not like the way that they were with me. Plus it was COVID, so I was alone. And what was crazy, or I mean, now I look back, I'm like, that's kind of funny, is like with my son, I was also alone. But that was a different situation. And then I was like, oh, I should be used to that because that's how I was with my son. But I wanted my partner to be there because it was his first child. And so he actually didn't get to see an ultrasound until we were both living in Florida, and I was like 36 weeks pregnant. which was really sad, for me that he didn't get to have those experiences early on. So I wasn't really happy. Like I was happy that I was doing prenatal care. I wasn't happy that I had to go to a specialist, that they were like making a plan for me, like, oh, well, you're advanced maternal age, so we're going to have to do this, and then we're going to have to do this, and then we're going to have to induce, and then this. And I was like, you guys can say all of that, but in my mind, I was like, I know we're going to be in Florida by then, so this isn't going to be a problem. And when we went to Florida, I believe in either one of the trips, I stopped by the birth center that I wanted to go to. I had a friend who lives in this area, and she was or is a lactation consultant. And so I asked her, like, what are your recommendations? So she gave me this one that she really liked. And so I went there and I talked with the head midwife, the owner of the birth center, and we just had a conversation, and it was so wonderful. And I'm like, if there is a spectrum of like, very, crunchy per se, and then like completely medical, like I'm somewhere in the middle. I'll do some alternative medicines, but I also, believe in emergency medicine and people, preventative medicine. So I'm like somewhere along that spectrum. And certainly, I know that there's so many people who have different thoughts about it. But when I talked with her, it was such a breath of fresh air because of the way that midwifery has their viewpoints. They really see it as whole person care. So when we would go into the appointments, it wasn't like, okay, mom, we're just going to do this check really quick, and then that's it. Like, we're going to, and then you can go. It's like, okay, mom, how are you doing? And okay, partner, how are you doing? And okay, brother, how are you doing? And that I think was nice to be able to do that and be able to have that difference of like, I've done this way before. I've done the hospital. I've done, seeing somebody, every week or whatever. And it's just like a really quick appointment. We're going to measure you. We're going to hear the heartbeat. Okay, you're good. See you later. And not really asking how the mom's doing, how's the rest of the family. And so that was really, really nice to have, because of the timing, and also because she was my second. We were in the Airbnb. We had to be out, by 11. And then we had actually booked like a hotel that was like fairly close to the birth center, because they want you to come at a certain time, like 5 contractions or every 5 minutes, lasting for an hour, a certain thing. And like, I wasn't really timing my contractions because I had taken on and decided that I was going to do more of like a meditative sort of thing, where you listen to these tracks and what they call ride the waves with the tracks, because they say that a contraction is like a wave. Like, it comes in really easy, it peaks, and then it comes back down. And usually that's like a minute. And so I was like extremely focused on that, to be able to listen to that. And I had been practicing for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so I really wasn't timing contractions. And so my partner called the birth center, and they were like, oh, well, if you want to come, like, yeah, we can take you. Cause they weren't a birth center that had a bunch of people lined up back and forth. It was like, they only really took a certain number, so that typically it would only be one person at the center at a time who was having a baby. And so we were like, okay, yeah, let's go to the birth center. And then like, she was born 9 minutes later. So we were a little close on that. She was almost a car baby, but that would have been another adventure too. So I did like that we weren't forced to stay there for a certain number of days or anything like that. They were like, well, by law, we have to keep you here for 4 hours and monitor you. But after that, you can go. But if you feel like that you need to stay and have the support, you can do that too. And that was really nice. So there are some things that, people might think, oh gosh, that's like, that's so different, or that's wild to think of, especially in different places. But I think that what I have seen is that the value of, in certain ways, I guess I have to preface that, the value of choice of like, are you going to do certain things this way, or are you going to do it that way? It's really your choice. Do you want to vaccinate? Do you not want to vaccinate? That's really your choice. I really fall into that category of like being able to have that medical autonomy. obviously to a point, because we know how Florida thinks about certain things, but that's neither here nor there. But being able to make that choice for myself and say, I want this kind of birth and I'm gonna, pursue it in this way was really comforting, because previously it had been like, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then because of this, you're also going to have to do this. And like one of the last appointments that I had was when you have to do a glucose test. And I really didn't want to do the glucose test because it's a really gross drink. And then you have to wait around and all that kind of stuff. And all I did was ask. I said, is there another option? And the doctor just like looked at me like I had two heads. And, she said, well, do you want us to have to prick your baby's heel when it's born? And I was thinking, like, you guys are going to do that anyway, and she just couldn't fathom that somebody would ask if there was something else that they could do. And it's those kind of things that's like, I feel for people who are going into this experience, not knowing that those sort of things aren't normal. You can ask, is this, can I do something else? Or what are the risks and benefits? Or explain to me, what are my options? And it's also one of those things that you have to advocate for yourself, which can be hard for people. But because of the experience that I had with my son, and I didn't wholly like that experience, I wanted something different. And so I advocated hard for myself. You're going to prick their heel anyway, but I don't understand why we have to have that sort of confrontation. All I did was ask, is there another option? I didn't say you're cuckoo and I'm going to do whatever I want, but then she like huffed and puffed and she was like, well, I guess that you can check your blood sugar 4 times a day. And I said, great, let's do that. I know that there are differences. And certainly what I feel like is that if there is something that you want to experience, you should find the people that support you to have that experience. And so I had a doula. I had the birth center. I had a birth photographer, and I just felt really just taken care of. The midwives who were there were just kind of, sitting and just waiting, which is a lot of what they do. They just sort of let things happen and intervene if it's necessary, or if there's an emergency, or, certainly in any of those instances. But I really cherish the experience that I had in Florida at the birth center, because it was just exactly what I needed. And I think it was exactly what I had wanted the first time around, but didn't get. So
I am so glad that you were able to put all of that together in what seemed like such a short period of time.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In Florida,
it was
that is,
great.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was, certainly it helped that I had that, the friend who lives in this area and is familiar with a lot of the different facet of birth center, or even there's even hospitals that are very like have alternative ways, like they have tubs where women can, or people can birth in. Which I think is fantastic, because there's not a lot of places that might offer that. And she also recommended the doula and the birth photographer to me. So it was like kind of just this little cocoon of like friends, helping out friends, and we're really excited to help me too.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned you weren't very supportive of the decision to move to Florida, but it looks like you found a gem, at least like in that experience.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There's definitely been some aha moments being here. What I do like, and this is just speaking to my own personal lived experience, is that California is very, or can be seen as like very individualistic. People don't really say hi, or really help a whole lot. Like when I was a single parent, living and breathing this, nobody really opened the door for me, even though I was carrying, like a this and a thing, I'd have to like kick the door open myself. And it's very different in Florida, and it's definitely still has some of that like Southern charm, that people are so friendly. they are so friendly, especially like where we live now. It's like a smaller town, and people strike up conversations all the time, or aren't afraid to ask or like say something or have a nice day. And I really like that aspect of it, because like in California it's different, and maybe I was jaded because I had lived there for so long that I was like, oh yeah, that's just normal, like people don't really talk to each other or whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's like kind of nice, here, where people are just seem more helpful and seem more like genuine, like, oh, have a great day, or like, what are you getting into today, or like, how are you doing? And it's just such a change, I guess, in like a different in a different way. It's like, it's hard to explain. But if you've been in that environment for so long, you're like, oh, that's normal. And then you come to something else and you're like, oh, maybe that's not so normal. Same sort of thing. Like when I was in Pennsylvania, like California is very property. Like, this is my property, I'm going to build a fence. In Pennsylvania, I was shocked when people didn't have fences. Even here, it's like, people don't have fences. Oh, aren't you supposed to have a fence? And like, this is mine, and like, stay out, sort of thing. I've experienced a lot of friendliness with people in Florida so far.
We're going to wrap this up. But
Sure, yeah.
I really encourage everyone who's like made it out to the end. Danielle has a wealth of knowledge about traveling and living all over the U.S. and highly encourage y'all, give her a follow and definitely connect with her. I have all her information in the description of this podcast episode. Danielle, I do have one more question before we wrap up, because you have that wealth of like experience. What are some words of wisdom or words of advice that you would provide to the younger version of yourself? The version of yourself that was in California and was just feeling like you're in that bubble, but you wasn't sure what getting out of the bubble looked like. Yeah, what would you say to that younger version of yourself?
I would definitely say, just do it. Like, don't even think about it. Just jump in, both feet. What's the worst that could happen? Like, you have to move back, which I've done several times, back to California, and do it scared too. Sometimes I feel like even my own fear keeps me from doing things, and keeps me from either pursuing things, and just doing it scared, and just doing it. You have a great idea, you have the support of the people who mean the most to you. Just take the leap and move forward.
Yes, and you did that.
Lots of times. Lots and lots of times.
You did that. Man, well, thank you so much for just allowing us to pick your brain a little bit and just learn through you how to navigate those moments where you just aren't so sure, like, where am I? What am I doing? Why am I experiencing these feelings of loneliness? Like, you shown us like ways in which we can address those moments of uncertainty. And I wish you and your family absolutely nothing but the best. I hope that sun lays off on y'all just a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I know.
And that inclement weather just lay off just a little bit.
Hurricane season's coming up.
Yeah, fun. That's why I left. Well, at least like a hurricane prone region. Like, I just, all my life, and I thought it was like, this is normal. And yeah, I learned you move to certain places is not normal. Like,
Yes.
Get out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nevertheless, wherever we are, we're going to make the most out of the experience. So that's what you're doing, and we love that for you, and we love that you shared everything that encompasses that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank y'all for tuning in to this episode of the Relocate Podcast. I hope that you hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button. If you like what you heard, tune in to some of the other amazing stories that I've had. No one's story is the same. I think episode 2, I had a guest who relocated from California to South Carolina. And then in between, went to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, that area. Story's still not the same. Different story.
Yep.
So yeah, tap in, and you may see yourself through someone else's experience. So, all right. Well, take care, y'all. Thanks for tuning in.